Welcome to Coffee Break. Thoughtful conversations for a busy world. Let's begin.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're pulling apart a set of sources today that, well, frankly, they made me a little uncomfortable while I was reading them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and not in the usual way. It wasn't the kind of discomfort you get from, hearing something controversial. It was the discomfort of recognition.
I get that. It's not an easy read. It's certainly not the kind of hustle culture motivation we see all the time where the answer is just to wake up at 4 a.m. and, drink more water.
No, it's much more subtle than that, much more insidious. We are looking at a body of work called The Architecture of Initiative, Deciding Without Permission. And we're really honing in on this one really sharp essay.
Coffee Break 056. One day, you'll realize you were waiting for permission.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And look, usually when we talk about productivity or, getting unstuck in your career or your life, we talk about tactics. We talk about time blocking or the Pomodoro technique or
optimizing your email workflow, right? Mechanical fixes for what we assume are mechanical problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this source argues that our stuckness, whether it's in a career pivot, a relationship, a creative project, whatever, it isn't mechanical. It's not even really about procrastination, at least not how we usually define it.
Right.
It argues that we are caught in a very specific cognitive loop. It's like we are standing at a crosswalk waiting for the walk signal. But the signal's been disconnected for 20 years.
That is the core thesis right there. The source posits that high-functioning adults, and this is a really important point, we aren't talking about lazy people here.
No, not at all.
We are talking about people who are good at their jobs, good at following rules, people with degrees, people with track records. These people often hit a glass ceiling in their personal agency because they are unconsciously waiting for an external authority to validate their next move.
And the terrifying part of the source material is the claim that you can wait forever.
Yeah.
There's no natural mechanism that just snaps you out of it.
None.
You can literally wait until you die.
Because the system is designed to reward waiting. That's the architecture part of the title. The argument is that we aren't broken. We are functioning exactly as we were programmed. The problem is that the program is obsolete for the environment we're now trying to navigate.
So our mission for this deep dive is to, debug that program. We need to look at why we disguise fear as caution, why we think we need certainty before we act, and ultimately how to operate in what the source calls the vacuum of authority.
Which is a concept we are going to spend a lot of time on, because the vacuum of authority is, it's where most dreams go to die.
Cheerful. Okay, let's get into section 1, the diagnosis. The source calls this the quiet habit of waiting.
And quiet is really the operative word here.
I want to push on that immediately. Because when I think of self-sabotage, I think of loud things. I think of binging Netflix for 8 hours instead of working on your business plan, or panic attacks, or, complaining to your friends over drinks. But the source describes this as quiet. What does a quiet habit of waiting actually look like in the wild?
It looks like being a model employee. That's the disguise. It looks like doing your current job perfectly, flawlessly, while quietly hoping someone important notices you're ready for the next level. It looks like taking another certification course.
Wait, hold on a minute. How is taking a certification course a bad habit? That sounds like the definition of initiative. That's professional development.
It feels like initiative. It absolutely does. It triggers the dopamine centers in the brain that say, I am being productive, I am moving forward. But the source argues that for many people, preparation is actually a sophisticated form of stalling.
Stalling.
Yes. If you are taking the course because the skill is absolutely required to execute the task, like you need a medical license to perform surgery, that's preparation, that's necessary. But if you're taking the course because you feel like you aren't authorized to start until you have the certificate, that is the quiet habit of waiting.
So you're outsourcing your permission.
You are outsourcing your permission to the certification board.
It's about the source of the authority. You're saying we are looking for a credential to act as a permission slip.
Exactly. I mean, think about the conditioning. From age 5 to, age 22, roughly, life is a linear track of gated progression. You're in first grade, you do the work, the teacher, the authority, grades the work. If it's good, they give you permission to enter second grade. You don't get to decide you're ready for second grade.
No, of course not. It's a permission-based architecture. You literally cannot advance until the gatekeeper opens the gate for you. If you just decided to walk into the next classroom, you'd be sent to the principal's office.
And it's comfortable. It's deeply, deeply comforting. You don't have to existentially grapple with whether you are ready. The system decides for you. All you have to do is perform compliance.
Do the work, get the grade.
Do the work, get the grade. We spend 2 decades conditioning our brains to believe that action A, doing the assigned work, leads to result B, external validation and promotion.
But then you turn 22, you graduate, and you hit the real world. Or even later, you hit your 30s or 40s, and you want to do something new.
And at first, the corporate world mimics school pretty well. You have a manager who is the teacher. You have key performance indicators, which are your grades. You have a performance review, which is basically the report card.
So the conditioning holds for a while.
It can hold. You can function. You can actually thrive in that kind of environment if that's what you're suited for.
But the source is really targeting people who want to move beyond that linear path. We're talking about the listener who wants to launch a consulting firm, or the person who wants to pivot from finance to, say, nonprofit work, or even something smaller, someone who just wants to tell their family no about a holiday obligation.
And that's where the glitch happens. That's where the old programming fails. Let's say you want to start a business. Who is the teacher?
There isn't one.
Who grades your business plan? Who tells you, okay, you have done enough market research. You are now officially allowed to launch.
Well, I guess ideally the market tells you, right?
Eventually, yes. But the market doesn't give you permission to start. The market only judges you after you start. And that gap, that huge, terrifying gap between having the idea and the market judging it, that's where the quiet habit lives and kills you.
You're just sitting there.
You're sitting there scanning the room for a teacher to nod at you. But there is no teacher in the room. It's just you.
So you freeze, but you don't call it freezing.
Oh, no, never. You call it prudence. You tell yourself, I'm just not quite ready yet. I need to read one more book on strategy, or I need to wait until the next fiscal quarter. Things are too chaotic right now.
That distinction is so crucial. The source mentions that we don't experience this as waiting for permission. That would be too obvious. We experience it as unpreparedness.
Yes. We interpret the lack of an external go signal as an internal stop signal. Our brain thinks if I were truly ready, someone would have told me by now. Or if I were ready, I would feel certain and confident.
And since I don't feel certain, and no one has tapped me on the shoulder,
I must not be ready. It's a logic trap.
I will act when I am authorized.
No one is authorizing me.
Therefore, I will not act.
And you can loop in that logic for 40 years. It's what psychologists might call a maladaptive schema, a mental model that served you well in school, but is now actively sabotaging you in the open world, in your adult life.
This transitions us perfectly into the second major point of the source material, which is all about how we rationalize this loitering.
Mm-hmm.
Because smart people don't like to admit they're stuck. Mm-hmm. We're very good at spinning narratives. So section 2 is the disguise. Mm-hmm. And the source uses a phrase that I have to admit it hit me pretty hard.
Yeah.
It was fear of judgment disguised as caution.
It's a defense mechanism, a very powerful one. High achievers, and the people probably listening to this deep dive, we don't like to admit that we're afraid. Fear is for children. Fear is irrational. We're rational adults.
So we don't call it fear.
We don't call it fear. We dress it up in a suit and tie, and we call it due diligence.
Okay, but let's be fair to the listeners here, and to myself, honestly. Due diligence is real. Caution is a valid, even essential survival strategy. If I mortgage my house to buy a crypto mining farm without doing any research,
right,
that's not initiative, that's idiocy, that's just gambling. How do we draw the line? How do we distinguish between valid, necessary caution and this disguised fear the source is talking about?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the source suggests looking at the specificity of the risk you're trying to mitigate.
The specificity.
Genuine caution is specific. It's concrete. It sounds like I need to check the zoning laws for this particular building before I sign the lease, because if the zoning is commercial instead of industrial, the entire business is illegal.
Okay. A specific risk illegal business and a specific preventative action check. The zoning laws. That makes sense.
The fear disguised as caution, on the other hand, is usually vague. It's nebulous. It sounds like, I just need to get a better feel for the market.
What does that even mean? A better feel?
Exactly. How do you know when you have it? There's no endpoint. Or, I need to network a bit more before I pitch my idea. How much more? When does the networking stop and the pitching begin? Or the classic, I'm waiting for the economy to stabilize.
Waiting for the timing to be right. That's the ultimate one.
The ultimate disguise. Because timing is infinite. It's a perpetually moving target. You can always argue the timing is slightly off. What you are actually doing, according to the source, is trying to mitigate emotional risk, not operational risk.
Emotional risk meaning?
Shame.
Embarrassment.
Shame, embarrassment, judgment, loss of status, the fear of looking stupid in front of your peers. The source draws a direct line between this waiting game and perfectionism.
Perfectionism.
We tend to view perfectionism as a standard of excellence. We say, oh, I'm just a perfectionist. I just want it to be right.
Which is the humble brag of every single job interview. My biggest weakness is that I just care too much and work too hard.
Right. But the source argues that perfectionism isn't a standard of excellence. It's actually a shield. It's a defense mechanism against judgment. If I produce something absolutely perfect, then you can't criticize me. If I wait for the perfect moment to launch, I can't be blamed for bad timing.
And if I never launch at all,
then I never have to face the reality that my idea or my execution might not be as good as it is in my head. I get to preserve the fantasy of my own potential.
So caution is just the bunker we hide in to avoid the shelling of public opinion.
Precisely. And the smarter you are, the better you are at building that bunker. You can rationalize delay with charts, graphs, and trend reports. You can build a fortress of reasons why now is not the right time. You can intellectualize your fear until it looks like wisdom.
That's a dangerous idea. Intellectualizing fear until it looks like wisdom.
It is the smart person's trap. You use your intelligence to predict every single possible negative outcome, and then you use that list of predictions as a justification for standing still. The source calls this analysis paralysis, but I think it goes even deeper than that. It's what some people call epistemic arrogance.
Epistemic arrogance. Okay, break that down for me.
Epistemic means related to knowledge. So it's the arrogant belief that you can know the outcome before you act. It's the belief that if you just think hard enough, if you just gather enough data, you can simulate the future, find the one perfect path, and execute it without error.
But you can't.
But the source is arguing that reality is far too complex for that. You cannot simulate the market response to your product. You can't truly simulate how you will feel 3 months after quitting your job. The system is too dynamic.
So by trying to figure it all out beforehand, we are actually engaging in a fantasy. We're trying to solve a puzzle that has pieces that only appear after you move the first piece.
Exactly. And this leads us directly into the myth of certainty, which is our section 3.
Right. Let's talk about that, because as someone who identifies with the learner persona, I love certainty. I love data. I want to know that X plus Y equals Z. If I don't have some level of certainty, I feel like I'm being reckless. And the source has a pretty aggressive take here. It says, why certainty rarely comes before action.
It completely challenges the order of operations that we think is rational. We think the logical order is information leads to certainty, and certainty leads to action.
That seems logical. I mean, that's how I cross the street. I look left, I look right, I get the information, I have certainty that no cars are coming, and then I take the action of walking.
And that works perfectly for crossing the street because the variables are visible, they're finite, and they're relatively predictable. But for complex life choices, a career change, starting a family, launching a creative project, the source says the order is actually reversed.
Reverse how?
The real order is action generates data, and that data, over time, generates a degree of certainty.
So you have to do the thing before you can know if doing the thing will work.
Yes, and that is absolutely terrifying to our rational brains. The source argues that waiting for certainty is the ultimate trap because in complex systems like the economy or your own psychology or human relationships, you cannot know the outcome in advance. You can't think your way into a new way of acting. You have to act your way into a new way of thinking.
Act your way into a new way of thinking. That implies that our brain's prediction models are just. They're insufficient until they have real-world feedback to work with.
They're completely insufficient. They're based on old data. Your brain is trying to predict a new future based on your past experiences. But if you want a different future, you need to generate new experiences.
It makes me think about, what's that concept? The region beta paradox.
The region beta paradox, yes. It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon.
Remind me how that works.
It basically says that we often stay in moderately bad situations much longer than we would in terrible situations.
Because the terrible situations are so painful, they force us to act.
Exactly. They overcome our inertia. But the moderately bad ones, they're just bad enough to make us unhappy, but not bad enough to force a change. So they trigger our coping mechanisms instead. We rationalize them. We wait.
So if my job was actively abusive, I'd probably quit tomorrow.
Yeah.
But because it's just kind of boring and unfulfilling and slowly draining my soul,
Right.
I'll stay for 10 years waiting for the certainty that the next job will be perfect.
Exactly. You are waiting for a guarantee that the grass is greener on the other side, but the guarantee never comes. So the source frames initiative not as a burst of energy or motivation, but as the fundamental structural change in your mindset. It's moving from, I need to know it will work, to I need to do it to see if it works.
That one little word changes everything.
It does. It transforms the action from a performance into an experiment.
And that feels so much less threatening.
Yes, that is the crucial reframe. If you view your action as a performance like a final exam or a Broadway debut, then of course you need certainty before you walk on stage. You need to know you're going to ace it. But if you view your action as a simple experiment, you don't need certainty. You just need a hypothesis.
I hypothesize that I might enjoy graphic design more than I enjoy being an accountant.
Right. And you can test that hypothesis in a small way without blowing up your entire life. But you can't test it by just thinking about it. You can't test it by reading another book about graphic design. You can only know by doing some of it. And yet, so many of us get stuck in that cycle of endless information gathering.
It reminds me of that quote, information is just a potential for power. It's not power itself until it's applied.
And often excessive information gathering is just a form of anxiety reduction. We read in another article not to actually learn, but to soothe ourselves, to feel like we are doing something productive when really we're just spinning our wheels.
Okay, so we've got the diagnosis. We are unconsciously waiting. We've got the disguise, fear dressing up as caution. We've got the myth, this idea that we can wait for certainty. Now, let's talk about the environment where all this happens. Section 4, the role of external validation.
Or as I like to call it, the gold star syndrome.
I definitely have a bad case of this. I think a lot of us who are, good students do. We are addicted to the good job.
It goes right back to that school conditioning we talked about. We're trained from a young age to work for the gold star, for the A on the paper, for the pat on the head from the teacher. We associate doing a good job with someone else noticing and rewarding us for it.
And in a professional environment, this is reinforced, right? You want your boss to say, good job. You want the client to sign off and say, great work. That's how the system works.
Which is fine within the defined context of employment. But the source argues that when it comes to initiative 2, driving your own life forward outside of a predefined structure seeking, that validation acts as a brake, a very powerful brake. It slows you down to a crawl.
How so, exactly?
Because you are outsourcing your sense of direction. If you are constantly looking over your shoulder to see if others approve of the path you're taking, you are limited by their imagination, not yours.
Oof, that is a powerful point. Limited by their imagination.
If you want to do something that your friends or your colleagues or your parents haven't seen before or don't understand, they aren't going to give you a gold star. They can't. They might give you a confused look. They might even give you criticism born out of their own fear. If you require their validation to proceed, you will stop right there.
So relying on external validation keeps you in the middle of the herd. It keeps you regress to the mean.
It keeps you safe and it keeps you average. This is where the source talks about the vacuum of authority. This is a concept I find really helpful, but also, as you said earlier, really uncomfortable.
Walk us through that, the vacuum of authority. What is that?
Okay. Imagine you decide to start your own business, or even just a serious side project like writing a book. You walk into your home office on day 1. You sit down at your desk. It's quiet. Too quiet.
Too quiet. That silence is the vacuum of authority. There is no one above you. No one is going to come in at 9:00 a.m. and tell you what your most important task is. No one is going to come in at 5:00 p.m. and tell you, good job today, you earned your keep.
That silence. It sounds incredibly lonely.
It is incredibly uncomfortable. We crave authority and structure so much that when it's gone, we tend to panic. We experience what some existentialists might call the dizziness of freedom.
The dizziness of freedom. I like that.
It's the realization that you can do anything you want, which immediately means you are responsible for everything that happens. So we start looking for surrogates to fill that vacuum of authority. We desperately search for a mentor to just tell us what to do. We obsess over our first customer's feedback to validate our entire idea. We get addicted to social media likes because each one is a tiny little gold star.
We're trying to fill the vacuum with anything that feels like a teacher's grade. Yes. But the source, with its title, Deciding Without Permission, is telling us that we have to learn to live in that vacuum. We have to learn to be the highest authority in our own lives.
Which means you have to be the one to say good job. You have to be the one to decide this is the right direction, even if no one else gets it yet.
And that requires a level of emotional maturity that is frankly quite rare. It involves shifting your locus of control from being external to being internal. It's the deep discomfort of realizing, I am the captain of this ship. If we hit an iceberg, it's on me. But if we discover a new world, that's on me too.
It's the double-edged sword of responsibility, isn't it? It's so much easier to be a victim of bad management than to be the bad manager of yourself.
Exactly. We would rather be a crew member on someone else's ship that's sinking than the captain of our own little raft. Because if the ship sinks, we can blame the captain. If the raft sinks, it's just us, alone with our failure. And the fear of that blame, even our own self-blame, keeps us waiting for someone else to build us a bigger, safer ship.
Wow. Okay, so we need to stop looking for the gold star from others. But practically speaking, how do we know when we're doing this? Because I can hear a listener saying, okay, I get the theory, but am I avoiding something or am I just legitimately busy? And Section 5 brings us to a really helpful distinction. Hesitation versus avoidance.
This is a crucial diagnostic tool because the source isn't saying be reckless. It isn't saying never think, just leap.
Right. We already established that caution is real and necessary sometimes.
So we have to learn to distinguish, is my delay a productive hesitation? Or is it a destructive avoidance?
And how does the source suggest we tell the difference between those two?
Hesitation is usually temporary and specific. It has a clear endpoint. I am hesitating to send this important email because I need to double-check the spelling of the recipient's name. That's hesitation. It serves a purpose. It fixes a potential problem. And once the name is checked, the hesitation is over.
Okay. It has a resolution point.
Exactly. Avoidance, on the other hand, is systemic and indefinite. Avoidance is, I'm hesitating to send this email because, well, maybe I should rewrite the whole thing. It's not perfect. And maybe I should send it next week when I know people will be less busy. Or maybe I should ask my colleague to read it over first just to be safe.
The goalpost just keeps moving.
The goalpost keeps moving. That's the telltale sign. If the condition for starting keeps changing, it is likely avoidance. If you catch yourself saying, I'll start when X happens, and then X happens, and you immediately say, well, now I need to wait for Y, you are in avoidance mode. You're creating Zeno's paradox for your own life, always getting halfway there, but never, ever arriving.
The source also mentions looking at whether the research phase never seems to end.
Yes, what some people call productive procrastination, reading about the thing instead of doing the thing.
Let's apply this to the real-world examples the source brings up. Career shifts, for instance.
Okay. You're in a job you dislike. You want to move to a new field. Hesitation is, I need to take this weekend to update my resume before I start applying to jobs on Monday. That's fine. That's a specific, time-bound action.
Makes sense.
Avoidance is, I need to go back to school and get this completely new master's degree that takes 2 years before I can even look at job postings in that field.
Even though you might have talked to people in that field who told you that you don't actually need the degree to get started.
Exactly. You are using the degree as a place to hide. It buys you 2 years of not having to face the potential rejection of the job market. It's a very expensive, very time-consuming hiding spot.
What about the example of starting a project or a business?
Same exact pattern. Hesitation is, I need to sit down for an hour and figure out my basic pricing structure. Avoidance is, I need to build the perfect website, design a brilliant logo, get 3 different quotes for business cards, and incorporate the LLC before I even try to sell my first item or service.
You're building the entire infrastructure of a business to avoid the single act of selling.
Because selling is where the judgment happens. Building a website by yourself is safe. No one judges you while you are coding in your basement. They judge you when you click publish and ask them for their time or their money. So we stay in the building phase indefinitely to avoid the selling phase.
That is such a clear indicator. If you find yourself doing work that keeps you safe and hidden from judgment, it might be avoidance. If you are doing work that moves you closer to judgment,
it's probably initiative. That is a brilliant rule of thumb. Just ask yourself, does this action increase my exposure to the world's feedback? Or does it keep me hidden? If it keeps you hidden, you should be very suspicious of it.
Okay, this brings us to the climax of the deep dive. Section 6, the hard truth.
The source really doesn't sugarcoat this part at all.
No, it really doesn't. The key takeaway is stated very plainly. No one is coming to approve your life choices. You decide when you start.
No one is coming. It's a phrase that has been used in various psychological contexts, I think most notably by Nathaniel Branden when talking about self-esteem. But here, in the context of initiative, it is all about ownership.
When I read that, no one is coming. It felt a little scary, to be honest. It feels a bit lonely. It almost feels like being abandoned.
It is terrifying, absolutely. It means the cavalry isn't coming over the hill. The dream job isn't going to knock on your door and offer itself to you. The perfect partner isn't going to just materialize in your living room. The permission fairy is not going to show up and sprinkle magical validation dust on you.
But the source argues that while it's terrifying, it's also liberating. How so?
It's incredibly liberating because if no one is coming, that means you don't have to wait anymore. You aren't stuck in some cosmic waiting room. You have the keys to the door. You have always had the keys. You can just leave. You can just start.
It shifts the locus of control entirely from out there somewhere to in here.
Exactly. If you accept that no one is coming to save you, you realize that you have to save yourself. And once you truly accept that, the waiting stops. The action can begin.
So how do we actually do this? The source gives us some practical ways to take ownership and move forward without perfect conditions. Let's walk through these, and let's try to be as specific as possible because generic advice like, just do it, doesn't help anyone.
Agreed. So the first strategy is what the source calls naming the wait.
Just admitting it to yourself.
Awareness is always the first step. You have to catch yourself in the act of waiting. When you feel that resistance to starting something, that urge to do more research, you have to pause and ask yourself, what am I actually waiting for right now?
Am I waiting for a crucial piece of information? Or am I waiting for a feeling of permission?
Right. Am I waiting for my boss to tell me I'm good enough to lead this project? Or am I just afraid to step up and volunteer? You have to name the fear. Say it out loud, even if just to yourself. I am waiting because I'm scared of looking stupid. Once you name it, it loses some of its power. It stops being this nebulous, rational-sounding caution and starts looking like what it really is, fear.
And that allows you to separate the feeling of risk from the reality of the risk.
Precisely. Okay, strategy number 2, small steps. But the source frames this a little differently than the usual baby steps advice.
Thanks, Bob.
It's about lowering the stakes of certainty. If you think you need to make a massive, life-altering leap, quit your job today, sell your house, move to a new country, you will freeze. The stakes are way too high. You need an impossible amount of certainty for that kind of move.
So you lower the stakes, you shrink the action down to the point where the need for certainty almost disappears.
Exactly. You take one small action that requires personal ownership but doesn't ruin your life if it fails. Think of it like poker thinking. You don't go all in on the first hand with no information. You make a small bet to buy information. You see a card.
Give me a concrete example of a small bet in this context.
Okay, say you have a secret dream to start a podcast. The big, scary action is quitting your job and buying $5,000 worth of audio equipment.
That requires a lot of certainty.
A ton. So the small bet is take out your phone, record a 5-minute audio memo talking about your topic, and send it to one trusted friend.
That's it.
That's it. That is an active initiative. You created something, you shipped it to an audience of one, you survived, now you have a tiny little bit of data. Hey, I actually enjoyed the process of talking into the phone. Or, hey, my friend said my voice sounds fine and the topic was interesting.
And that tiny piece of data builds the certainty we were talking about earlier. It's not handed to you, it's generated.
Exactly. Action generates certainty. Small actions generate small amounts of certainty, which then give you the courage to take slightly bigger actions. It's a flywheel. You just have to give it that first tiny push.
Okay, and strategy number 3 from the source. Reframing boundaries. This was an interesting one because it touches on the interpersonal side of waiting for permission.
Yes. This is huge. So often we wait for permission to set boundaries in our lives. We wait for the other person, our boss, our spouse, our parent, to agree that our boundary is fair and reasonable.
I'll stop checking my work email at 8 p.m. If my boss agrees that's okay, it won't hold it against me.
Right, and of course if the boss says, well, I really need you to be available, then you feel like you can't set the boundary. The source says this is backwards. You set the boundary because you decided it was necessary for you, not because they co-signed it.
I am not checking email after 8 p.m. Full stop.
It's deciding without permission. You are informing them of your new boundary, not asking for their approval of it. That is a massive fundamental shift in the power dynamic. It's scary, for sure, because they might get mad. They might push back.
And that brings us right back to the beginning, the fear of judgment.
It does. It's all connected. Are you willing to tolerate their temporary displeasure in order to own your own time, your own life? That is the core question. The architecture of initiative is built on the willingness to be misunderstood, at least temporarily, in service of a long-term goal that is your own.
Wow. We have covered a lot of ground here. Let's try to summarize this journey because I feel like we've gone from psychology to existentialism and back again.
It's a big topic. So we started by realizing that most of us are stuck in this quiet habit of waiting. We think we're just preparing or being prudent, but we are actually unconsciously waiting for a permission slip that is never going to come.
Because the authority figures we're looking for, the teachers from our past, they don't exist in the domains where we want to grow.
Right. And we saw how we disguise our fear of judgment as caution or due diligence, and how perfectionism is often just a shield to keep us from ever having to face criticism. We identified that epistemic arrogance, the flawed idea that we can know the future before we act.
We then busted the myth that certainty comes before action. We learned that it's the other way around. You have to act first, even in a small way, to get the data that builds the confidence you crave.
We talked about the gold star syndrome and how seeking external validation slows us down, especially when we find ourselves in the vacuum of authority that comes with true adult ownership.
And finally, we accepted the hard but liberating truth that no one is coming, and that the way forward is to name the weight, take small, low-stakes bets to build certainty, and to build the structure of our own lives ourselves, one decision at a time.
It's a lot to process, but it feels like the kind of mental shift that once you make it, you can't unsee the world in the old way.
It really does. You start seeing these patterns everywhere.
It changes everything. You stop looking at the world as a place that grants you things, and you start looking at it as a place where you build things. You start asking, may I? And you start asking, how do I?
Before we sign off, we always like to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought, something to chew on.
Based on the source material, I want to leave you with this question, and I want you to really sit with it. If you knew for a fact, with absolute 100% certainty, that no one was ever going to give you permission to do that thing you want to do, would you start today, or would you give up?
That hits hard.
Because if the answer is I'd give up, then maybe you don't really want it as much as you think. And that's okay. That's valuable information. But if the answer is I'd start today, then you need to realize something. The silence you hear right now isn't a no. It's just the absence of a yes that isn't required.
The absence of a yes that isn't required, that is definitely going to stick with me.
Stop listening for the permission. Start listening to yourself.
Listener, thank you for diving deep with us today. We hope this helps you spot some of those invisible barriers and maybe, just maybe, take that first small step without looking over your shoulder.
You decide when you start.
We'll catch you in the next deep dive. Take care.
Thanks for spending this time with us on Coffee Break. If this conversation stayed with you, you can find more episodes here on the channel. Until next time, take care.